It's Adam here for PC Monitors, and today I'm going to be taking a look at the Osd on-screen display menu system of the Acer XR341CK. The Osd is controlled by pressable buttons on the underside of the bottom bezel towards the right. There's also a power LED that glows blue when the monitor's on and amber when it's on standby. If you press the first button, or in fact any of the other buttons, it brings up a little quick menu with various symbols. The first function there, it's actually a G, it's game mode, and if you activate this, it basically changes what the Osd, how the Osd is laid out. There's 3 different presets, 1, 2 and 3, and all of these presets are actually separate to the main presets of the monitor if you're not in game mode. Game mode doesn't do anything special with the responsiveness or anything like that. It's really just a different set of presets. And I mean, you've got the flexibility to change all of these settings as well, whether you're in game mode or not. So back into normal mode there. The second button along controls the overdrive, which you see that little overclock icon there. The pixel overdrive, which can be set to off, normal or extreme on this monitor. The third button controls the volume of the integrated speakers, or if you've got something connected to the 3.5mm jack, it will control the volume of that. The next button along allows you to manually select the input used by the monitor. The next button along allows you to go left on the menu to reveal a couple of more options. There's picture-in-picture, picture-by-picture functionality, which I'm not going to go through because I've only got one thing connected to the monitor, and the main menu. There's also the power button at the end there. On the main menu, it's split into various different sections. There's picture, the first section, and that allows you to control the Acer e-color management preset of the monitor. You can also control that with this little E icon at the bottom there. And all these do is to change the brightness and the contrast to various preset values. And if you actually change anything at all, I mean, you've got full control over all of the settings in these presets, but once you change anything, it'll actually just revert to the user mode anyway. So don't worry too much about those. You can also control the brightness of the monitor. You can control the contrast. There's a feature called black level, and that's set to 5 by default, and I'll just open up the Rgb website to show you what this does. And it is a feature I've discussed on the Z35 already, the Acer Z35. It's exactly the same. If you decrease that, now bear in mind on this video the representation of the colours is the shades is not going to be exactly as I see them, or as you'd see them in real life, but you'll be able to see roughly what this mode does, the black level feature, sorry. So if you reduce that, you can see a lot of the shades disappear. You get sort of crush of shades. It doesn't just apply to the greys, it applies to various other shades as well. All of the sort of darker colours on these contrast gradients are less distinct than they should be as well. But I think the main appeal of this feature, so I'm back on 5 now, is that if you adjust it above 5, you can go all the way up to 10 if you'd like. It makes some of the darker shades much brighter, which can help reveal extra detail in dark areas and games and that kind of thing. It does actually lighten blacks as well, so it does reduce the contrast ratio. But I understand that from the perspective of a competitive gamer, on certain titles it might be nice to be able to get a little bit of a competitive edge by doing this. There's also a blue light feature, a low blue light setting on the monitor, and you can set that to various values with 80%, 70, 60 and 50. The lower the percentage, the greater the reduction in blue light that you're applying. And it's a little bit confusing. It does adjust the brightness when you change the blue light setting, but if you then manually adjust the brightness, sorry, I'm pressing the completely wrong thing here. Yeah, so if I manually adjust the brightness, you'll see it says blue light off, although it isn't actually off, it is still on. If you do want to turn it off, you go to the next menu, the colour menu, and you see there's a setting there, colour temperature blue light. You just switch that to something else. But I'll come on to that in a little bit. So back to the picture menu. There is ACM, which is I think that stands for Adaptive Contrast Management. It's basically the dynamic contrast feature of the monitor, which you can set to on or off. I explore this in the review. I explore most of these things in the review. Super Sharpness, which I don't think I even mentioned in the review. This increases the sharpness. Basically, it makes things look overly sharp and quite a bit artificial. Actually, it's not as excessive as I've seen on some monitors, but it's essentially for when you're running the monitor at a lower resolution. It may give a slightly nicer effect then to sort of counteract some of the softening from the interpolation process of the monitor. So again, there's the colour menu, which we've looked at very briefly when I was explaining about the blue light setting. There's a gamma feature as well. You can set that to 1.8, 2.4, 2.2. As noted in the review, the actual numbers here, at least on the unit I tested, did not correspond to the actual gamma. There is the colour temperature setting again, which is set to blue light at the moment. You can set it to user, warm, normal or cool. If you're on user and then you go further into the menu, you can change the red, green and blue colour channels, gain and the bias. So the main ones you'll want to focus on, the usual RGBs, they're the gain at the top there, the top three. There's Rgb Mode, which I'm not going to activate, but all that does is resets certain things to the factory default, including the gamma. I think it adjusts the brightness and the contrast as well. I'm not going to double check by activating it, because once you activate it, you then lose anything you've customized. And if you then try and customize any of the settings, it simply turns off Rgb mode. So it's more of a sort of reset of certain settings rather than any special mode that does anything great for you. There are also 6-axis hue and saturation controls. So you've got red, green and blue, yellow, magenta and cyan. And the monitor's really quite nicely set up without having to fiddle with them. But I know some people do like to tweak certain things, perhaps like to make some colours more saturated for whatever reason, so you can do that if you want. Next there's the OSD menu, and that allows you to adjust things like the language of the OSD, the timeout period, so how long it remains on the screen after the last button press before disappearing. I've got this on 120, which is 2 minutes, 120 seconds. Refresh rate number, what that does is it, as it says on the tin, displays the refresh rate on the screen. So you can see there at the top, 75 Hertz, and because this monitor has adaptive sync, if you're using FreeSync on an AMD graphics card, then this will actually correspond to the frame rate of the game as well, because obviously the refresh rate of the monitor is trying to match that. So it's quite useful. Transparency. You can adjust the transparency of the OSD, make it more or less transparent. game mode, which I've already touched upon, an Aimpoint feature. So this draws an on-screen crosshair. There are various different settings here. Unfortunately, it doesn't actually show them on the screen until you exit the menu, which is quite annoying because I'm not going to be able to show you these very easily. Well, I'll do it anyway because I'm kind. So that's the first one, icon 1. See that little crosshair in the middle there? I'm not sure, maybe in game mode you can... yeah, you see it disappears every time I open the menu. It's quite annoying for the sake of this video. Next I'll show you icon 2. I'm really sorry, this is very cumbersome. So that's that crosshair. And if I can just get myself to the right section of the menu again. Icon 3. So yeah, on-screen crosshairs, there you go. Next, there's the setting menu. That has various different settings, as you'd expect. You can manually select the input used by the monitor. Again, you can set the OD, the overdrive, pixel overdrive of the monitor. DTS, they're the speakers of the monitor, a special feature which sort of enhances the bass or something like that. You can enable or disable that. You can change the DisplayPort format. So you might want to change it to 1.1 purely for compatibility, but to make use of the full sort of functionality of the monitor, like FreeSync, all of that stuff, you need to have that set to DP 1.2. You can also daisy chain multiple monitors. It has a DisplayPort output. If you want to do that, you can then change whether they're displayed as clones of each other, so they're all displaying the same content, or extend them so that it can all display different content. HDMI black level, I'm using DisplayPort, so this doesn't actually apply here, but you should really set that to normal where possible if you're using HDMI, but if you're using an older console or something like that, you may want to use the low setting. Just depends on what system you're using, really. There is picture-in-picture, picture-by-picture, which I didn't show you before, but I can at least show you the settings that are available there. So you can change picture-in-picture, you can change how big the little PIP box is on the screen, you can change where on the screen it's displayed, you can change what the sources are for that. And oops, I've accidentally activated it here, I think. Yeah, so you can see that's what it does. So it gives you that would be, if I had another source connected, it would be displaying there. Okay. You can also have small, so it'll make that box smaller, or you can have it so it's P by P, picture by picture. Ah yes, something I actually do quite like, the Ambient Light feature of the monitor. And the monitor has 9 LEDs facing downwards at the bottom of the bottom bezel. You can see them there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And they project light towards the bottom. You can see it on my kind of semi-matte desk surface here. And it's a nice little feature, actually. I quite like it. I mean, I'm a bit of a sucker for ambient lights and that kind of thing anyway, so I do quite like this feature. You can change the colour of the LEDs. So there's blue. Actually, I'll change the brightness first. You can also adjust that, because then it'll make it a bit easier to see. So you can make that nice and bright, which is nice. Change the colour, so it's blue at the moment. You can have it white, orange, and again, as I said on there, I'm just going to double check. It's sort of more of a yellow than an orange, really, but never mind. Random, so it'll just randomly pick a colour and change every now and then. Mnt Status. I believe on the Z35 video I said this probably stands for monitor NVIDIA technology status. It obviously doesn't. This is a AMD FreeSync compatible monitor, nothing to do with G-Sync, so I think it probably just means monitor status. But basically, when it's in its usual static fixed refresh rate, it's white, whereas if you're using AMD FreeSync on your GPU at the time, it'll actually go red instead. Yeah, red. So, I mean, if you want it to be red all the time, you can do that as well. There's also green. And back to blue again. So yeah, it's quite a nice little feature. It also has different lighting styles. So there's fixed, which is what I've got at the moment. It's just static. They always appear to be on. You can have them breathing. Or you can have them flashing. Or you can even have a little ripple effect, which kind of reminds me of Christmas tree fairy lights. It's a bit of a weird effect, but you know, whatever floats your boat, you can do that. LED on in sleep. So when the monitor goes into standby, you can control whether the ambient lights remain on or off. So if you're kind of using it as a room light of sorts, then you can make it do that even when the monitor's sleeping, which is quite nice. Next, there's wide mode, and to show you this, I'll have to set the monitor into a different non-native resolution, and also open a game. Then I'll be able to actually show you this. Okay, I'm on Battlefield 4 now. I'm running this at the full HD resolution, 1920 by 1080, and the default wide mode is full, and this means it just stretches the image out, uses an interpolation process, stretches the image out across the entire width of the monitor and all the height as well. You know, there's no black border around the image or anything like that. So obviously the aspect ratio is completely different for this. This is a 16:9 resolution stretched out across my 21:9 screen. So it does look distorted, it's stretched, it looks very odd. If you don't want it to do that, you can select aspect, so it'll maintain the 16:9 aspect ratio, which you can see. And because it's the full HD resolution, and it's filling up a 27-inch space on the monitor, it's still using an interpolation process. If I were to select 2560 by 1440, it would fill up the screen the same 27-inch space, but it wouldn't have to use interpolation because it would be mapping it 1:1 for each pixel anyway. So that would look a lot sharper, just like a sort of native 2560 by 1440 display. But because this is full HD, is using an interpolation process, you do lose some sharpness compared to using a native full HD monitor. I mean, it's not the worst I've seen. It does give you a reasonable degree of softening though. So if you're connecting to a games console or something like that, this monitor isn't ideal for that, although you can do it. And you know, it will be passable, it will be playable. So it's a sort of second use, yeah, fair enough. It's also 1:1, and regardless of the resolution you're using, so I'm using full HD here, it'll be displayed without any sort of distortion or interpolation, so you can see there's a much larger black border around the image, including at the top and the bottom, because it's only using 1980 by 1920 by 1080 pixels. Next, there's DDC/CI, which is certain plug-and-play functionality of the monitor. If you want to control the OSD using software, for example, might as well just leave that on. It doesn't really matter on most systems leaving it on. It's low latency mode, which, as discussed in the review, doesn't seem to actually do anything positive. Possibly slightly increases the input lag rather than decreasing it. But anyway, it's the latency is very low either way. I just leave that off, which is a default, to be honest. Power off USB charge, so whether you want to be able to charge devices connected to the USB ports when the monitor itself is off or on standby. So if you've turned it off using the power button, it still counts as standby technically. And there's an option there to reset everything to the factory defaults. Finally, there's one little extra section of the OSD, information, and that shows you various information such as the DisplayPort or other input used, the resolution and refresh rate, and also the mode, so if it's normal mode or if it's if you've got FreeSync active on the graphics card. So there you have it. That was the OSD on-screen display menu system of the Acer XR341CK. Be sure to check out the full review on PCmonitors.info.